My name is Jonathan Hayes, though most of my friends simply call me John. I'm no novelist, but I have always been a storyteller at heart. I believe some stories are not just events pieced together in a timeline, they are confessions, revelations, sometimes even warnings. What I am about to share is one of those stories. I work really hard to make videos for you all, so please subscribe to my channel and like this video. Also, make sure to tell me your name and where you are watching this story from. Let's start the story. It isn't my story alone, though I was present when much of it unfolded. No, this is primarily about her, the woman who seemed to live two lives within one fragile existence. Her name, for the sake of privacy, will remain Catherine. To me, she was always Katie. To others, she was something else entirely. Katie's journey took place not in some faraway kingdom, but in the very heart of modern America, a land that, for all its freedom, still cages people with invisible chains of appearances, social expectations, and fear of judgment. Her truth was beautiful, but it clashed with the glittering lie she lived among her wealthy peers. And it all came crashing down one night under a chandelier of golden light, during a gala where masks were worn not on faces, but within souls. But before we step into that glittering hall of betrayal and heartbreak, let me take you back. Let me tell you who Katie was, and why she made the choices that nearly tore her life apart. Katie grew up in Connecticut, a place of sprawling lawns and towns with an almost picture-perfect sense of American prosperity. Her father was a lawyer who loved jazz more than law, and her mother, a teacher of literature, raised her with the works of Emily Dickinson and Virginia Woolf humming through her childhood like lullabies. Yet, when Katie left for Boston to pursue her studies, something inside her shifted. Surrounded by wealthier peers, she felt ordinary. While others arrived at campus in expensive cars, she traveled by train. When her classmates casually summered in Europe, Katie worked 2 part-time jobs at a bookstore and a cafe. It was not shameful by any means. And yet, shame crept in quietly, not at her life itself, but in comparison to theirs. Her beauty was unmissable, brown hair that seemed to fight between waves and unruly curls, eyes sharp and green as fresh spring leaves. But beyond that, there was a will in her. She wanted to belong. Belonging, to her, became a hunger so sharp it could bleed. It was during her time in Boston that she first met Alexander Reed. Alexander, Alex to everyone but her, was different from the men Katie saw parading through her social life. He was steady, almost quiet, the kind of man who noticed small things, the way the corners of her lips pressed when she was nervous, the way her fingers traced the rim of her coffee cup when she was deep in thought. He wasn't rich. He wasn't from a family of legacy. He was a software engineer who had spent years climbing out of the kind of poverty most of Katie's wealthy friends pretended didn't exist. That alone made him resilient. He carried no pretense, only authenticity. And Katie, tired of pretending at times, fell deeply for that authenticity. They met at a bookstore, of all places, both reaching for the same battered collection of Baldwin's essays. Their shared smile turned into shared coffee. Coffee spilled into long talks. Talks eventually sank deeper, into truths, into laughter, into love. Months into their relationship, Alex asked her to marry him beneath the Boston Public Gardens weeping willow in springtime. She said yes, trembling with joy. But then came the problem. The yes wasn't the hard part. Living that yes in front of her wealthy circle, that was. Katie's wealthy friends were the type who owned art but didn't understand it, who spoke of charity while stepping over the homeless, who lived not for love but for status, comfort, and validation. Around them, Katie hid Alex. She spoke of traveling when she wasn't. She hinted at flings with men of their world when the only man she loved was sharing her modest apartment. Why? Because of fear. Fear that they'd sneer at Alex's modest beginnings. Fear that their judgment would reduce her to something fragile, excluded from her carefully stitched web of belonging. So she pretended to be single each time she attended their mansion parties, rooftop cocktail evenings, or weekend retreats in the Hamptons. She walked through those glittering places with a glass in her hand, a smile on her lips, and a lie pulsing beneath her ribs. The lie grew. It wrapped around her like ivy. It suffocated her even as it protected her. And Alex, though patient, knew nothing. At least not then. It was winter in New York when the gala happened. The frost sparkled against skyscraper glass, and the Reed Foundation, a charitable fund run by one of Katie's friends, was hosting its annual winter gala. Katie had no intention of bringing Alex. She told him she'd be back late, just another obligatory evening. But Alex, tired of existing in the shadows of her double life, had made a decision. He showed up, dressed in his best black suit, with a determined calm in his step. The ballroom was cathedral-like. Chandelier crystals scattered golden light across gowns and diamonds, across laughter laced with arrogance. Katie stood at the center, radiant, laughing with her circle of friends. They believed she was single, as they always did. Until Alex walked through those doors. That was when the story I promised you truly began to unravel. Katie didn't see him at first. She was too busy adjusting her posture, ensuring her laughter sounded more like music than nerves. To her wealthy friends, Eleanor with her champagne glass, Victor with a smirk that dripped with old money charm, Katie was simply one of them. But then, the air shifted. A murmur rippled across the ballroom as Alex entered. He did not belong here, at least not in the eyes of the guests. His suit was elegant but not bespoke. His confidence was quiet where theirs was loud. And yet, in that moment, he belonged more than anyone, because he wasn't pretending. Katie's eyes landed on him by accident, mid-laugh. The blood drained from her face. Her glass trembled just slightly in her hand, rescued only by practiced composure. "Who's that?" Eleanor whispered beside her, interest already alight in her gaze. Katie opened her mouth, but the words collapsed in her throat. By the time she blinked, Alex was already moving, straight toward her. "Good evening." His voice was calm, though Katie caught the edge to his tone. He turned not to her friends, but to her. "Katie, you didn't mention you'd be here tonight." Her heart stopped. Alex rarely called her Katie in public, only Alex had that privilege. She wanted to silence him, to take his hand and drag him away, but all eyes were now locked on them. Eleanor's eyes narrowed. "You know each other?" Katie forced a smile that felt like it might split her lips. "This is a friend. An old friend." Alex's gaze didn't waver. His jaw tightened just enough for her to notice. "A friend," he repeated quietly, as though testing the word, tasting the bitterness of it. Then, louder, "Funny. I thought fiancés were more than friends." The word detonated like shattered glass across marble floors. Gasps fluttered around them. Someone laughed from shock, brief and sharp. Katie froze, trapped between two worlds she had tried too hard to keep separate. Her friends stared at her with expressions that rippled between disbelief, judgment, and faint amusement. Eleanor, the quickest with her tongue, spoke first. "Fiancé? Katie, is this true?" Katie's throat burned. She couldn't breathe, let alone answer. Alex wasn't cruel, but he was hurt. His words carried no malice, only exhaustion. "I've loved this woman for 2 years. I asked her to marry me beneath the willow trees in Boston. She said yes. But here I walk into her world, and somehow, I'm invisible. Somehow, I don't exist." A silence heavier than chandeliers settled over the hall. Katie's mask, her perfect, polished persona, splintered under the weight of truth. "Alex, please," she whispered, but it was too late. He wasn't there to humiliate her. He wasn't even angry in the way her friends expected. He was hurt, raw, honest, and his honesty was violent in a place built on illusions. That honesty left her naked before their judgment. Eleanor arched one perfect brow. So that's why you've never brought him? You've been hiding him? Katie's face burned with shame, not at Alex, never him, but at herself. At the life she pretended to live. At the fear that caged her into silence. Yes, she admitted, voice breaking. That one syllable was enough to destroy the facade she had spent years weaving. Katie fled, heels echoing against marble as her heart pounded. The cool winter air outside slapped her skin, sharp enough to draw tears. She stumbled down the stairs of the grand building, the sound of laughter and whispers following behind like daggers. Behind her, she heard footsteps. Katie. She stopped, unwilling to turn, but Alex's voice was too full of heartbreak to ignore. She faced him, her breaths white in the freezing air. I didn't mean for this to happen, she whispered. What did you mean, then? His eyes glistened under the streetlight. Tell me, when did I become a secret you were ashamed of? Her lips trembled. I was never ashamed of you. I was ashamed of me. Of who I am around them. Alex, you don't understand what it's like to stand among wolves, always wondering if they'll shred you apart the second you don't measure up. He swallowed, his silence cutting deeper than anger. They live in a world where money is everything, she continued desperately. If they knew about us, they'd laugh. They'd say you're not good enough. But that's the thing, Katie, he said softly. I don't need their approval. I don't need their acceptance. I only needed yours. And tonight, I learned I don't even have that. The silence that followed was unbearable. Katie's tears froze against her cheeks. That night ended not with reconciliation, but with Alex walking away into the snow, his figure swallowed by the city's glow. Katie watched him leave, powerless, knowing the lie had cost her more than her friend's approval. It had cost her the man she loved. When she turned back, the grand building loomed behind her, filled with eyes that would never let her forget. That night, she no longer belonged to either world, too raw for Alex's honesty, too broken for their judgmental glitter. For the first time in years, she wasn't pretending. And the weight of it was unbearable. Katie woke to silence. Her apartment, usually filled with the warmth of Alex's presence, his half-written notes on the counter, his coffee mug stacked slightly crookedly, the quiet rustle of him working on his laptop, felt empty. She sat at the edge of the bed gripping the engagement ring that still clung to her finger, as though it were the last anchor in a storm. The night replayed in relentless detail in her mind, Alex's voice, Eleanor's raised brow, the quiet hush of everyone who realized she had been living a lie. For the first time, she hated her own reflection. Not because it was plain or flawed, but because it was hollow. She didn't see Katie, the girl who laughed at Baldwin essays, the girl who spilled coffee on herself while rushing to catch a train. She saw a performance. A shell. The text messages began appearing before noon. Katie, darling, you could have just told us. Eleanor. So this is the big secret, huh? Interesting choice. Victor. Engaged? How quaint. Another. None of them really asked if she was okay. They were curious, amused, entertained. To them, her life was a show that had just taken a shocking twist. Katie threw her phone against the couch and pressed her palms against her eyes. What have I done? She whispered into the silence. Elsewhere, Alex wandered the streets of Manhattan with his collar pulled against the wind. He hadn't gone home the night before. Instead, he'd walked until dawn painted the skyscrapers a pale gold. He didn't regret telling the truth, no, that was never the regret. The regret was realizing just how much Katie had hidden from him, how ashamed she must have been to stand beside him in her gilded world. Yet even through the anger and heartbreak, he couldn't stop loving her. Love, he realized, had a cruel irony. It remained even when trust was broken. At a small cafe, his phone buzzed. It was a message from Katie. Short. Simple. Desperate. "Please, can we talk?" Alex stared at it for a long time before typing one word. Tonight. That evening, Katie waited at home, her nerves frayed and raw. When Alex finally arrived, he looked tired, his eyes shadowed, his shoulders heavy as if he carried the weight of her lies. She rushed toward him, words spilling. "Alex, I'm sorry. I can't even begin." He stopped her with a raised hand. "No excuses, Katie. Just the truth." "Why?" Her lips trembled. For once, she didn't try to hide behind charm or composure. "Because I was scared. Scared that if they knew, they'd treat me differently. That I'd lose everything, the acceptance, the belonging. I thought if I showed them us, they'd laugh, they'd judge. I didn't realize I was betraying you in the process." His eyes were pained, but steady. "Do you hear what you're saying? You chose them over me. Over us. Over what we were building." Tears blurred her vision. "I thought I needed them. But when you walked away last night, I realized all I had left was nothing. Because without you, none of it matters." Her honesty, raw and breaking, filled the silence between them. Alex sank into the couch, sighing deeply. "Katie, I don't know if I can come back from last night. I don't know if I can stand beside you again knowing how easily you erased me from your world." "Then let me fix it," she pleaded, kneeling in front of him. "Let me show you I'm not afraid anymore. Let me prove to you that I choose you. I want our truth, Alex, not their lie." He looked at her, conflicted. He wanted to believe her. He wanted the Katie who laughed with him in bookstores, not the Katie who vanished beneath champagne and chandeliers. Finally, he spoke. "You can't fix this with words. You'll have to show me. Not just once, but every day. If you truly want us, then tell the world. Not just your friends, but yourself." Katie nodded through tears. "I will. I promise." The opportunity came sooner than she expected. Eleanor sent her a message inviting her to brunch, a subtle, unspoken test. Katie knew the table would be filled with whispers, smirks, and veiled ridicule. But this time she wouldn't walk in alone. That Sunday, Katie arrived with Alex by her side. Their hands were intertwined, not hidden in the shadows. Heads turned, eyebrows arched. Eleanor's half-smile was both patronizing and curious. "Katie," Eleanor purred, "so this is the mystery man." Katie tightened her grip on Alex's hand and met Eleanor's gaze. "No mystery. This is Alex. The man I'm going to marry." A silence fell. For once, Katie didn't flinch. She didn't care for their approval. Their judgment, sharp as claws, slid off her because Alex's hand in hers was stronger than all their sneers combined. Alex looked at her then, not with disbelief, but with something warmer. Hope. Word spread quickly among Katie's circle. Whispers became conversations, conversations became gossip. By the following week, nearly everyone in her affluent world knew about Alex. Some dismissed him as unworthy, others mocked Katie behind her back for settling beneath her class. For Katie, each comment stung, but strangely enough, it also freed her. The worst had already happened. The mask she had worn so carefully was gone, and there was nothing left to protect except the truth of her love for Alex. Still, not all was cruel. A surprising few reached out quietly with compassion. One friend, Margaret, a quieter woman often overshadowed by the likes of Eleanor, sent her a simple message. "You looked happy holding his hand. That's more than I can say for half the marriages in our circle. Don't lose that." Katie reread that message a dozen times. For the first time in months, she felt a flicker of genuine belonging, not in wealth or status, but in honesty. At the next charity event, Katie and Alex arrived together again. The room tensed as whispers floated through the air. This time, Katie didn't hide. She tuned out the smirks, the raised brows. She focused only on Alex's calm presence beside her. Of course, Eleanor couldn't resist. She leaned close with her glass of champagne, her voice dripping with judgment. "Katie, darling, it's admirable, really. But don't you think you're limiting yourself? You used to have such potential." Katie turned her gaze on her, unflinching. "My potential doesn't lie in what you think I should marry. It lies in the life I want to build. And Alex is the only man who makes me feel like I don't need to perform for anyone." For once, Eleanor had no clever reply. Alex squeezed her hand gently under the table. It wasn't just a gesture of love, but of admiration. He saw she was changing, not just for him, but for herself. Despite her steps forward, the wound between Katie and Alex was still raw. At night, when the noise of society faded, they still faced the silence of their apartment, heavy with unspoken doubts. One evening, Alex finally asked the question that had been lingering. "Katie, if I hadn't shown up at the gala, would you have ever told them about me?" The honesty that had to follow was painful. Katie shook her head, tears gathering. "I don't know. I wanted to keep you safe, from them, from their cruelty. But in doing that, I lost you in the one place I should have kept you safe. With me." Her words cracked, but she didn't hold them back anymore. "Alex, I'm not asking you to forget it. I'm asking you to let me spend the rest of our lives proving I'll never put anyone's opinion above us again." Alex closed his eyes, listening not just to her words but to her breaking voice. Slowly, he reached across the table, covering her hand with his. "Then prove it," he whispered. "Day by day. And maybe, I'll learn to trust again." Katie stopped attending every glittering event her friends held. Instead, she spent more time helping Alex with his projects, supporting him in his world just as he had supported her in hers. She realized too late how remarkable he truly was, not because of his wealth, but because of his drive, his kindness, his unshakable integrity. Meanwhile, little by little, some of her old friends began to fade away, bored now that Katie no longer played the role they wanted her to. At first, it hurt, the loneliness clawed at her. But as months passed, the emptiness transformed. She found solace in building something new, a life not measured by prestige, but by sincerity. Spring returned, just as it had the day Alex first placed a ring on Katie's finger under the Boston Public Gardens weeping willow. This time, she was the one who led him there. The branches swayed, their green curtains whispering in the light breeze. Katie stood beneath them, her heart pounding. "Alex," she began, voice steady but eyes shimmering with emotion, "I've spent my whole life trying to belong in rooms that never wanted me. But the truth is, I already belonged, with you. I just couldn't see it. I don't want to hide anymore. Not from the world, not from myself. And if you'll let me, I want to start over here, where it all began. This time with no lies." Alex gazed at her in silence, the memory of their first promise hanging heavy between them. Then, slowly, a smile broke across his face, the first real one she had seen in weeks. You really don't care what they think anymore? He asked softly. Not when I have you. The moment stretched, full of forgiveness, of fragile hope. And then Alex pulled her close, pressing his forehead against hers beneath the willow branches. The days after their moment at the willow tree were not instantly perfect. Trust, once fractured, does not mend overnight. Alex remained cautious, quietly observing whether Katie's promises would turn into action. Katie worked deliberately. She no longer hesitated to introduce Alex as her fiancé in public, whether at work functions, casual dinners, or family gatherings. Each declaration was like a thread stitching together the fabric of trust that had been torn. More importantly, she stripped away the layers of performance she once wore. When she laughed now, it was unpracticed, spontaneous. When she spoke, her words were not weighed by how they might impress. Alex noticed these shifts, subtle but steady, and felt himself softening. One evening, while they were cooking dinner together in their modest apartment, Alex touched her cheek and said, "You're finally you again, Katie. The woman I fell in love with, the one who spilled coffee on my book and laughed about it." Her chest tightened, tears threatening, but this time they were tears of relief. She was finding her way back, not to the girl she had been, but to a woman who finally embraced herself. Eleanor, predictably, couldn't let Katie go without one last performance of superiority. One afternoon, Katie received an invitation to an exclusive summer retreat in the Hamptons, a place where she had once craved belonging more than anything. Katie hesitated, the invitation heavy in her hands. Once, she would have jumped at the chance. Now, she wasn't sure. Alex asked gently, "Do you even want to go?" Katie shook her head. Not anymore. That world doesn't feel like home. It never did. It was just a costume I wore. Instead of the Hamptons, she and Alex used that weekend to visit her parents in Connecticut. Her mother welcomed Alex warmly, her father swapped stories with him over coffee, and for the first time, Katie saw her past and future coexisting without shame. When she walked through her childhood home holding Alex's hand, she realized something profound: her parents didn't care about appearances or status. They just cared about her happiness. And for once, she cared about it too. Katie found herself stepping into Alex's world more fully. He introduced her to his close group of friends, ordinary, hardworking people who laughed without pretense, who asked questions without judgment. At first, Katie felt out of place, but soon she began to relax. One evening, while sitting at a cramped kitchen table with Alex's friends, she found herself laughing so hard her stomach hurt. No chandeliers, no flowing gowns, no whispered critiques. Just genuine joy. On the subway ride home, Katie leaned her head against Alex's shoulder. "I never knew belonging could feel like this. Simple. Real." Alex kissed the top of her head. "This is what I wanted to give you all along, Katie. Not glitter, not approval, just us." Months passed, and slowly, Katie's old circle drifted further. She didn't fight it anymore. The few who stayed, like Margaret, were the ones who truly mattered. Then, one evening, Katie was unexpectedly invited to speak at a panel on young philanthropists, an event that drew many from her old circle. She almost declined, afraid of facing that world again. But Alex, gently encouraging, told her, "This is your chance, not to prove yourself to them, but to prove to yourself you're no longer afraid." On stage, dressed elegantly but simply, Katie spoke not about prestige or appearances, but about authenticity. "In a world where we pretend more than we confess," she said, her voice steady, "I've learned that true belonging doesn't come from being accepted by everyone, it comes from standing beside the person who loves you when the crowd falls silent." The hall grew silent. Even Eleanor, seated in the front row, seemed momentarily at a loss for her sharp tongue. When the panel ended, Alex was waiting backstage. The pride in his eyes was enough to tell Katie she had finally done it. She had chosen truth, their truth, over illusion. 1 year after the fateful gala, Alex and Katie returned to the Willow Tree in Boston, this time surrounded by family and the friends who had truly shown them acceptance. There were no chandeliers, no marble halls, no polished critics. Just flowers, music, and the quiet river winding nearby. Katie walked down the aisle with her father, her dress soft and simple, her smile radiant. When she reached Alex, tears already slid down her cheeks. "I once hid you from the world," she whispered as she held his hands, "but today, I promise never to hide again. To choose you, to honor us, not in secret, but in light." Alex's vow was equally steady, "You are my truth, Katie. And no matter how loud the world gets, I'll always fight to hear your heart over their voices." When they kissed, it wasn't just a wedding. It was redemption. It was freedom. The applause that followed wasn't from critics, it was from people who genuinely loved them. And for the first time in her life, Katie felt wholly, unshakably at home. Years later, Katie often thought back to that winter gala in New York, the night everything had shattered. At first, she remembered it with shame, replaying the betrayal, the whispers, the fear that drove her to hide the man she loved. But as time passed, she began to see it differently. That night hadn't been her ending, it had been her beginning. Her life with Alex was not a fairy tale drenched in perfection, but it was real. Their Brooklyn apartment was cluttered with books and half-finished projects. Their mornings were filled with coffee and laughter, their evenings with conversations that stretched into the quiet hours. Some days were hard, arguments, compromises, challenges, but every day was chosen honestly, together. Katie never returned to the world of polished lies and judgmental laughter. She had built something better, something sturdier, friendships forged in sincerity, a marriage that thrived not on appearances but on truth. Often, she found herself walking to the Willow Tree in the Boston Public Garden when they visited the city. She would stand beneath its branches, remembering how it had once witnessed her promise, her failure, and finally, her redemption. Now, with Alex's hand in hers, it symbolized everything she had fought to become. One spring evening, Alex asked her quietly, "Do you ever miss that old life?" Katie smiled, shaking her head. "No. Because that wasn't living. This is." As the sun dipped low, painting the world in gold, Katie realized she had finally found the belonging she had always searched for, not in wealth, not in acceptance, but in love that needed no disguise. And so her story, once fractured by fear, ended in wholeness, in the simple, quiet, extraordinary truth of a love she no longer had to hide.